Today we are going to cover callback function. How do we write the callback function? What are the downside of using callback function? We'll write few code as well to understand, because these are the very complex subject, and if I don't go through the code, it will be difficult for you to understand. So let's get started. So what is a synchronous function? We have already gone through is what is callback. So anything, let's take an example for this async function. You pass few arguments, which could be an object, which could be a number, it could be in string, or maybe a number and a JSON object too. And then finally you pass a callback, which is a function. In this case, you can see. So whenever the async function is done, it kind of calls this callback function. So let's say it has to read a file, for an example, this function. And once it reads the file, because since it's a disk operation and it reads the file, then it kind of makes a callback call that I have successfully read this file, or probably I have received an error. These are the two outcomes which I can pass to the callback function. And how does a callback function or a synchronous function signature looks like? So you can see there's a function called async function. Then we pass few parameters, and then finally a function which is nothing but a callback function. So let's straight away jump into writing a code, a very simple code through which we'll be able to understand how do we write a synchronous function and all. What I'm going to do, so there's an npm called fs. Fs stands for file system, is files system. So if you go to let's go to node.js.org and then go to docs, and then API reference documentation. Okay, and then go to file system. You can see this right after errors and events, you'll find file system. And then there are multiple things like promise example, callback example. So yeah, so fs does all that job. Fs is an npm, is a node package manager, which kind of does all the disk operation, like writing a function, writing a file, reading a file, creating a directory, and all that. So now let's search for a function called read file. Yeah. Uh, so you can see fs.read file, right? So it takes the path, the file path, and then a callback function. Okay. So read file is an asynchronous function, and we will go through it. Or probably what we can do is we can go through a synchronous function of read file, and then see what exactly happens, and then come back to an asynchronous version of a read file. So what am I going to do is I'm going to create a sample.txt. Here I'm going to write this is a sample text, save it, and then I'm going to import or require the fs module. I'll say require and then pass fs module name, and then I will say fs dot read file. Then you can see there are two versions of it. One is the read file, another one is read file sync. The first one is a asynchronous way of doing things, and the second one is synchronous way of doing things. Let's first use the synchronous way of doing things. Okay, and then see what it takes. So a read file sync takes the path of the file, and then an object which they are calling options. And whatever you see after the variable, you can see a question mark after the variable name, right? This options. So this is a non-mandatory argument. पाथ के बाद जो है क्वेश्चन मार्क नहीं लिखा है, दैट मीन्स इट्स अ मैंडेटरी आर्ग्यूमेंट. ऑप्शंस के बाद क्वेश्चन मार्क लिखा है, दैट मीन्स कि वो नॉन मैंडेटरी आर्ग्यूमेंट है. अगर आप नहीं भी पास करोगे तो चलेगा. नाउ लेट्स पास द path to it, some weight, and then I think I've written it in desktop txt, and then I'll say file, or I'll just say content inside the file, and then I will do console.log. Okay, and then I'm going to say content. So what do you think will be the output? Anyone, please? I hope you are following me. Can you please tell me what will be the output here?
This is a sample text.
Yep. Let's see and run it. No, this is not the case. So yeah, so it kind of takes the file, read the file, and uh, just return the buffer output. Okay, which is nothing but the binary output. Now what we are going to do is, you must have seen the second argument is options, which is a non-mandatory argument, and it says encoding. Inside that option it has encoding. So let's pass encoding as UTF-8. Okay, and then see what happens. Just remember that this is an object. Okay, it's a JSON object which takes an encoding parameter, and the value to that encoding parameter is UTF-8. So now let's run this, and now we can see this is a sample text. Okay, so but this is a synchronous way of doing it. Okay, it first read the file, your things get stopped here for a moment, and then once this, let's say the file content is very very big. Okay, it's very very big. um, Let me in fact copy something. Let me copy this entire thing, maybe here too, and then I'm going to my sample.txt file. Now I'm going to run the same code. So this is the entirely, but again, this is not too big of a content. Uh, Probably what I should do is I should copy paste this multiple time, and then so you can easily figure out that momentarily it stops for a moment and then comes. This is not what we want. This is not actually the forte of a JavaScript language. So when we are using JavaScript and we have to go through an IO call or maybe go through a disk operation, then we should use the asynchronous function. So what we are going to do now is we are going to use the async part of it. So let me write this entire thing again. I'm going to say fs dot read file. Now I'm going to look at what it takes. It takes the path and then the options. Path is mandatory, and then the options is also mandatory here in this case. I think there is something wrong here. It should be question mark in the documentation. It's non-mandatory here as well. Okay. And then if you don't pass this encoding, you are going to see the buffer output. So let me do one thing. Let's pass the path to the file, uh, desktop sample.txt. Then I'm going to say encoding. Let's say it's UTF-8. And then finally, I'm going to pass a callback function. This is a function. Always remember that this is the function. If you go to the read file, the first is path. The second one is an option. You can see this entire thing. And the third one is a callback method, which takes two things. One is the ERR, which is nothing but an error or exception. The second argument is a data, which is a string. So let's write a callback function. We are going to say const callback function, and then we are going to use the arrow. If you remember, the first argument was ERR, and the second one was data. So we always check for an error first. So if ERR, then we are going to say, let's say console dot error, and then pass the error object, and then return. Once we have seen the error, we should return from here. Okay, if there is no error, then probably we are going to say console dot log the data. So data is nothing but the content here. So either we'll see the error or we will see the data which is there in the file. Let's save it. We have passed the callback function. So this is going to directly read, because directly we are calling the function. We are not storing anything. We are directly calling the function. The function is going to find this file, um, read the file under the encoding format of UTF-8, and then finally pass the callback. The callback will look something like this. So if there is an error, it will do the logging for the error. Otherwise, it will do the logging for the data. Now let's run it. Yeah, we see the output here again. So this is what the basically how do you write the callback function. um, any confusion until now? We have always said like function is a first class object in JavaScript. So the third argument, whatever you see, is a callback function. So we can pass a function inside a function, that I've already told you long time back. So any question, any doubt you have?
Could you please repeat the difference between read file and read file sync?
Okay. Let me comment this out. Const content. I'm going to say fs dot read file sync. It takes the file path. Let me copy this somewhere because I'm going to use it. Const path is equal to this. I'm going to pass the path. And then the second parameter is, of course, the encoding UTF-8. So that's all it takes. And then I'm going to say console.log content. So what happens is it reads the file first and take the entire buffer, entire content into the buffer, and then it locks it. So let's say the file reading takes around 200 millisecond. So this line will not execute until the 200 millisecond is done and the file reading is done entirely. Let's say the file size is 200 MB. Okay, reading a 200 MB file is itself is very huge. So what will happen exactly is your um, execution point will remain on line number 4, which is here, until the entire reading is done. Okay, so if you have to do something else, let's say you want to call http dot get, you want to say http dot get, and let's say http dummy api .com/products. This is not going to execute until this entire file reading of 200 MB happens. Just stay here. Ideally, reading a file content and hitting this API is not dependent. This could have happened in parallel. These two are not dependent to each other, right? I can understand if it's dependent to each other. Let's say the file content itself contain this URL which we are supposed to hit. Then probably we are going to read the file, get the content, then call the http.get a method, right? Where we pass the content to the get argument, right? But this is not the case here. So what happens is, let's say it takes around 200 millisecond. We stay here for 200 millisecond, then log it, and then it comes to line number 8, which is getting the products from the dummyapi.com, which exactly we don't want. For an example, if I can somehow make this, now let me copy this entire thing. And this is a huge file. You can see this is a huge file. This probably is going to take some time. And what we are going to do is we are going to do dummy json.com. docs, get all products, right? Okay. Let's see if we have to call this, or maybe let's simulate this only. Don't call it. Let's say we put here something like console.log calling this API. Okay. Did we save this? What is the size? So yeah, this like 125 kilobyte. Okay. So it should take a while. Now let me call this. Oh God, it's so fast. So, but you see, right? This entire content is printed. Then only we are seeing this, right? Calling https dummyjson.com. But instead of doing this, if we call this, we are calling the asynchronous API, and then we are doing this console log that I am going to call the products API. You will see the content will be printed later on. This logs will get printed first. Let's see this. No. So this looks like it is very, very fast. It's very, very fast. Reading file is very fast. Did I save it? Oh, I didn't save it. Find again. Yeah, you see this? This content is getting printed. Let us copy this content somewhere. Okay, then search for dummy. Dummy JSON. What exactly is happening? I need to change the console property now. Terminal settings. Now the size of this buffer is too low to get printed, so I need to increase the or let's run it on terminal directly. cdjs and just say node js test.js. Yeah, you see this? First it prints calling this API, and then it is trying to access the desktop folder. You can see this pop up. And when I say okay, it actually prints the entire thing. Can you see this? So in this case, first your products API get called and then your output. Why? Because while your file is being processed to read, this call moves forward. This doesn't wait here. This just call and goes back. So this callback goes to your where it goes? It goes to the task queue. Now event loop is waiting when our stack will be over or empty. As soon as it is empty, I am going to throw this callback function to the stack or the call stack. As soon as the callback is called, you can see the output in the console.log.
So why can't we use this callback function and read file sync?
Why can't we use the callback? Because it's written that way. It doesn't use the asynchronous functionality. It doesn't. If you see this, let me, you see the read file thing, it doesn't give you a third method which takes the callback function. And if you read the description also, it says synchronously reads the entire contents of a file. And if you see the read file, it says asynchronously reads the entire contents of a file, and it takes the callback, method as the third argument. That's what the difference is. It is a way it's written, right? The first one doesn't utilize the asynchronous functionality of Node.js or the JavaScript. The second one is actually utilizing it. And that's the way you should code in Node.js.